Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Hustle Sauce. My name is Michael Sharkey. I'm the founder of Your Podcast Coach, joined as always by Ryan, co-founder of Thanks.io. All right, I know the answer to this, but Ryan, what are we hustling today?
All right, well, we're gonna talk about your favorite thing, your specialty. We're gonna get this Hustle Sauce going as a podcast. So we're gonna talk about setting up our podcast stuff.
Yeah, so I know if you're on YouTube, you're gonna see this all on YouTube. And if you're not, I definitely recommend this episode, check out the YouTube. But if you're just listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, obviously some good information here. And again, back to this whole thing, like we are showing you that we can set up a content platform, YouTube, podcast, even the hacks that we've done the last couple episodes by doing a redirect to a Google Doc. Like, don't get caught up in oh my God, it's going to take me months to build a WordPress site or whatever. No, just a redirect to a Google Doc and that gets you your show notes. But today, I think it's important to focus on, yes, what I focus on with a lot of people, which is, that audio podcast. But today, sort of the nuts and bolts behind the scenes, but I really want to get into why it's important. You need a name, you need a description, and you need artwork. So, we talked in that first episode about the name.
Right.
I mean, I like Hustle Sauce. You like Hustle Sauce. And I think the other thing is why we're going to talk about name, why we're going to talk about description and artwork today is that over half of the discovery that's made for new podcasts, meaning I'm looking for a new podcast about how to start a business, how to be an entrepreneur, that sort of thing. Over half of the people will say that they discovered their favorite podcast by scrolling through their favorite podcast app. They were scrolling through Spotify, They were scrolling through Apple Podcast, and they came across a podcast that caught their eye. So long before they ever listened, this was the moment in which they discovered. So we began with a bunch of different names. What are you working on? What are we working on? What were some of the other names that we were thinking about, Ryan?
Oh, I don't know. Show me your growth. We wanted to do something related to growing an online business. Yeah.
Right. And then you came up in the middle of the night with Hustle Sauce. And I'm like, what a great name. So imagine a person on Spotify scrolling through business or entrepreneur podcasts coming across Hustle Sauce, or somebody who is in the 9 to 5 and they're trying to do a side hustle. That's the kind of name that catches people's eye. And really think about that. Like if you're starting your business, regardless of what your content's about, like what's a name that, goes beyond just another business podcast, just another cooking podcast, just whatever it is. So, first and foremost, Hustle Sauce, like that's a really eye-catching name. So, name, description, artwork. First of all, I give us credit, or I give you credit because
I want to interject because Hustle Sauce kind of just came to me as inspiration. It's a really good brand, but I also see a lot of people get obsessed over, I got to find like this really cool, catchy brand thing. And it doesn't always need to be the brand. It could just be what the product or what the thing does as well. So there's a few different angles you can go at here. You don't always have to be clever. And
I think that's a good point. One of the coaching that I give with clients is don't get too cute with it.
Right.
Which, and I actually, because we use the word hustle, I think that really speaks to, what the entrepreneur is doing right now, especially because side hustle has become such a part of what we talk about. But you've got your
podcast coach, which more or less literally, is that the name of your podcast?
Yeah, that's the name of my podcast and the name of my business, because it lends itself to the sentence of saying, hi, my name is Michael Sharkey and I am your podcast coach. But there and again, like I've worked with a client that called their podcast The Rabbit Hole, and they are software developers. So like, wait a minute, why would you call that? Well, I mean, if you're in tech, that's a term that developers use a lot. But, if you're going to go crazy, different, weird out there, that's where description comes in to make sure that you can accurately describe what your podcast is about. So, find the right name that works for you. A catchy name works. Maybe don't get too cute, but just find the name that works, that describes quickly what your podcast is about. I probably would not have called our content channel and podcast Funky Sauce, but Hustle Sauce works. So anything you want to add to the name conversation before we get into description, Ryan?
No, let's do it. Description.
So second part of this is really, I mean, not to state the obvious, but this is what describes your podcast. And this is so important. Back to that person. They're scrolling on Apple Podcasts. They're scrolling on Spotify. They come across a name they like. They come across this thing. When they click in, you know, odds are over, and when I say odds are, it's more than, I think it's 2/3. They're going to look at the description before they hit play. And the number may actually be higher now. It was an independent study done by a Canadian media company that I read a couple of years ago, but it holds true, is that, especially now because there's so much more content out there, is that accurately give a description of what your podcast is about. So Ryan, do you want to read off kind of what we created before we started today's episode?
Yeah, sure. And I'll mention, I was impressed. You did a little bit of light kind of magic copywriting there with that hypnotic imagine word when you started out. So imagine if you could see all the stuff your favorite podcasters and YouTubers did to get their channels going and growing. With every new episode, Hustle Sauce gives you a behind the screens look at all the sauce that goes into getting a content-driven business off the ground. New episodes released 3 to 5 times a week.
And what we did there, I mean, that's 3 sentences. So, you know, with this description, don't feel like you've got to write 500 words. In fact, you don't have the room. You can't do it. But think, what are 3 to 4 sentences that I can put in that tell my potential listener what this podcast is all about? And yeah, I did, you know, the imagine word is very powerful because it future sets and it's like, oh, wow, you know, what is this all about? And then that second sentence is really about, you know, and I love the term behind the screens. With every new episode, so we're putting out new episodes, Hustle Sauce gives you a behind the screens look at all the sauce that goes into getting a content-driven business off the ground. So if I am scrolling and I see this description, then immediately I'm like, I know what this is about.
And it's benefits driven and does allude to some of the features of the actual thing, but
absolutely. And you know, we've said time and time again with this that, you know, don't get too hung up on things. Don't spend weeks trying to make little decisions. The secret behind your podcast description, and what I'm going to show you this in just a second, where this goes and how you do it, is that at any time, when 30 episodes in, before you even launch, you can update this. So don't feel like whenever you put this into your hosting platform or you put this on for Spotify or that sort of thing, that it's like, oh my gosh, like I can never change it.
Yeah, I'm dying. I'm dying in the second sentence to add a so you can or just more benefit driven, you know, so you can follow along and give them the punch. But like you're saying, a lot of times when you write something like this, tomorrow you're going to read it again. You'll have a totally new perspective on it and you'll be able to tweak it and evolve it. So
yeah, good or bad, you can tweak it. You can evolve it anytime you want. And the thing that what I'm going to show you in a second with Libsyn is that when you update it, within a few minutes, it updates all the podcast platforms. So, you know, at any point, especially because podcasts and content evolve, you know, if we wake up in 6 months and Hustle Sauce is only talking to a very specific category of entrepreneurs, well, then we change the description and that's okay. So anything else on the description that you want to add?
No, this is great.
You know, as you're scrolling, the third part of this and arguably the most eye-catching part of this is the thumbnail logo that exists. So all you have to do is imagine anytime you've ever been on your smartphone. Most podcasts are consumed on smartphone. You're scrolling on Spotify, you're scrolling on Apple Podcast, and you see all those little thumbnails of images. You know, big companies, big podcast networks will spend thousands of dollars getting that image perfect. They'll test it, that sort of thing. You do not need to do that. But what you want to do is just think, okay, what can I create that looks professional, it looks eye-catching? Now, we talked about our logo in episode 1 and the work that you did, Ryan, to put the Hustle Sauce logo together. And I think, you know, kind of with that sauce, I mean, truth be told, it's because we're using the word hustle, it's a jar of tomato sauce. I really feel like this is a great, I mean, it may look different.
Yeah, let me ask you, and for the people listening now, I forgot to mention hustlesauce.info/episode 3 is where you'll see what we're showing on the screen here. Yeah. But But what do you think? I mean, I made this thing in Google Draw in episode 1. It is time for me to go and get a professional designer to do this, or should we just upload this to Libsyn today?
I think we can upload this to Libsyn today. I really do. The only thing you might want to add, or we might want to add, is our names, with Ryan Hartman and Michael Sharkey. But quite honestly, where we're at in this content business is, again, we can update this. I don't think we need to wait. We can update this a week from now, 2 weeks from now, if we want to spend the money and invest on, something else. But I really feel like the feel, which that really comes down to what artwork is about, is what feel are you trying to capture? The feel of this is gives us a good starting point. It really does. Great. So like I said, name, description, artwork, 3 things that a lot of people don't put a whole lot of time and effort into. And if you get this right, you're going to greatly increase the discoverability of your podcast when people are scrolling through Apple and Spotify.
Great. So should we jump on into Libsyn and
sure,
and get moving?
Yeah. So I just, this is a podcast hosting platform called Libsyn. They've been around since 2004. They're kind of the industry leader in this. There are other platforms out there. I use Libsyn all the time because it's not expensive. And the main thing that when you're going to do your podcast, you really want a podcast hosting platform because you want to make sure that when a person goes to hit play, it's there. And second of all, this is how your podcast shows up in all the big platforms: Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, etc. The screen you're seeing right now is the show settings screen. So whenever you go to set up your Libsyn account, it's going to ask for your credit card. It's going to ask for what kind of plan you work. I mean, what did you do, Ryan? The $20 a month, 15, 30?
I did the 40 because I think we're planning on creating a lot of content. It forced me to commit. So I spent a little
Okay. Well, and the other thing with Libsyn is if you decide, hey, we're only going to put out 4 episodes a month and we only need the $20 a month or the $15 a month, you can change it anytime, and they prorate in real time. So you never pay for more than you actually need. So like one of my podcasts that I don't update regularly, I'm on the $5 a month plan, and Your Podcast Coach podcast, I'm on the $15 a month plan. So it's really about what you need. So you set that up. It takes like 2 minutes. You get to this screen, which is the show settings. So really the first thing with the show settings is that what you've got on the very, very top, show title.
Yep.
Obviously it's called Hustle Sauce. One thing I want to add is that when you're putting in your credit card, it does ask for the show slug. Mm-hmm. So we don't have to get too technical, but this is how your RSS feed is going to work. Show slug is a pain in the butt to change. So if there's one thing you want to get right, it's your show slug. So just think, and again, it can just be the name of your podcast. We're calling ours Hustle Sauce, so it kind of makes sense. So you might find that it's if somebody's got a similarly named podcast or things like that, but this is not anything that's going to show up in marketing materials. This is all back end. It's just a pain in the butt to change. So put it in once, set it, and forget it.
Yeah.
Next window is the show description. So, really, it's just, do we want to just copy and paste what we wrote and just put it in there?
Yep. That's what I'll do here. Great. Okay.
And then, so it says here, like you see in Libsyn, this description may be used in several places, including your RSS feed. This is just going to show up. But like I said earlier, you put it in here, you're going to publish it. It's going to show up in Spotify. It's going to show up at Apple. Website address is what you can put right there. That's, literally, and this is where we're going to put hustlesauce.info. Yep. And again, so as you scroll down, we are doing episodic, meaning, listening order is not important. There's good value in episode 1. There'll be good value in episode 20. Serial, just as it says here, should be consumed beginning with the first episode. Subtitle on here, if you have it. Here's the thing with the subtitle is it's going to show up in some podcasts and not in others. Okay. But it's not a bad thing. Like, we could put in here, if we wanted to put a subtitle, kind of what we put in the description, behind the screens of your favorite, the building of your, how to build a favorite content channel, things like that. This is where you don't want to get too hung up on this because some platforms display it, some don't. So that's where and really if it's going to be a subtitle, what are 5 to 7 words that help describe what you do?
Would our names with Michael Sharkey and Ryan Hartman be a subtitle, or is that?
No, that's going to be, that'll be later on, and I can talk about why that's important.
Okay. Is this too long what I've done here? I took most of that sentence from the description.
I mean, you can leave it. I mean, ideally, if we're doing a subtitle, you want it in that 5 to 7 word range.
Okay.
But again, I mean, a lot of people leave this blank.
Yep. I'll leave it blank. Yep.
So really the next 3 are kind of important because this is where your podcast is going to be categorized. And the largest platform of podcasts is Apple Podcasts. You'll want to get this right because if you go to launch a podcast and it takes off, you want to make sure that if it is in the new and noteworthy in Apple Podcasts or one of the highlighted podcasts, is that you don't accidentally make it a cooking in the category so that it's categorized properly. So this might be a business, entrepreneurship, business marketing. And category 1 is going to be the most important. And category 2 and 3 can be broad. So let's say maybe category 1 might be business, entrepreneurship, or business marketing. Let's see here.
Like that?
I mean, we're probably, I would say entrepreneur. Yeah, I think you got it right. I think you actually have it right the way you've got it. Go on business, entrepreneurship, business marketing, and business. But like I said, you want to get this right because you go to launch, you get a bunch of episodes, people going right out of the gate. You want to make sure you show up in the business and not in a, finance or cooking or that sort of thing. Public contact email. This is how people are going to contact you. This will be public, as it says. So I wouldn't put your private email in there.
Yep.
And then owner's name, and we don't have to fill this out right now. You asked about names earlier. Author. This is where we want to put our names.
Under author.
Under author.
Okay.
So I'm going to give a hack here for discoverability. You can put Michael Sharkey and Ryan Hartman for this. When you are initially telling people about your podcast, always recommend, especially if you're doing a business podcast and you're just getting started, I would say to somebody, if you are search Hustle Sauce, hosted by Michael Sharkey, or Hustle Sauce hosted by Ryan Hartman on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Here's why. Your name will be much more searchable than the name of your podcast. Best example I can use is that my podcast is called Your Podcast Coach. Podcast and coach show up in a lot of people's descriptions, shows up in a lot of people's, names. However, Michael Sharkey only shows up in 1 podcast. Well, technically 2. Well, now 3. But that's my point is search and discoverability is a lot easier with your name in it. And by putting it in the author field that we just did, now somebody can search Ryan Hartman.
Okay.
And it's suddenly there. So it's a bit of a hack, but it helps for discoverability.
Makes it easier to find. Yeah.
It makes it easier to find. I imagine at some point we will probably use some bad words. So profanity. If you're going to be clean, go clean. If you don't have to set it. Here's the thing to know is that if you set it as clean and you do use any sort of foul language, you can get kicked off of Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Okay.
So just know that that's the thing. And then language code, English, tags and keywords.
How important?
I say it's depends on the platform. Mm-hmm. Most people will tell you that it's not that important. I don't think it's a bad idea to put it in there. Entrepreneurship, marketing, big tags like that. Tags are going to be better when it comes to like SEO for notes and things like that. And then, I wouldn't put I don't put a phone number in any of my podcasts just because I don't have a company phone. Yep. I would say definitely want to include in directory. Default show feed is the Libsyn Classic feed. We don't need to get into that. And then your copyright notice is just a normal, it's funny because it's blank on my podcast right now. If you leave it blank, I believe it autofills in most platforms. So then now we're creating the the final piece of the puzzle, which is the artwork.
Yeah.
And this is just where we choose the file and put this in.
I think I had it on my computer. I might have to do this later. Hopefully I grabbed the right one. I did.
All right. And it is 14 by 114, right?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the big thing. Apple will not load this. And it says here, for best results, please upload a high-res JPEG or PNG file, IMP square, at 1400 by 1400. As long as you do that, you're not going to run into any issues with Apple, Spotify, or any service.
They don't care about the quality so much. Like, as long as it's that res, it's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
As long as it's that res, it's fine. I mean, the quality is really about what we talked about at the beginning. I mean, you want a logo in there that's going to catch people's eye. But as long as it's this, but if it's 2600 by 2600, they're going to bounce you. And if it's 700 by 700, they're going to recommend you resize it to 14.
Got it.
And then after that, it's pretty much you're set. I think you've got other stuff down at the bottom that you can load, if you're doing Twitter and Facebook. And we should come back to all the URLs, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, things like that. But we could put our YouTube channel URL in here, but a lot of these aren't even set up yet.
Right, so we'll come back later and optimize this channel once we've got things rolling a little more. Okay.
Yeah, but really what this does, once you save these settings, and I think maybe just for the sake of today, we kind of, stop on this.
Yep.
But what we'll do in a couple of episodes is look at uploading sort of that first audio, that first trailer.
Yeah.
And then what that's going to do is that's going to put your very first episode out there on Spotify and Apple Podcast. And just know you're going to want that out there a couple of weeks. If you're doing a big launch or you've got, a bunch of marketing going to a June 1st launch or something like that, you just want to make sure you're doing all this work at least 2 weeks before your launch. We're doing this in real time. So it's okay. But just especially if you're doing big money and sort of a big launch, this work needs to be done at least 2 weeks before the world sees it. And that's just for indexing purposes and search purposes and things like that. But really today is about name, artwork, and description. And you saw us do this all in the show settings inside Libsyn.
Great. Yeah, that's enough hustle for me today.
That's enough hustle for me. So I think we're good. I think we've hustled.
All right, so guys, it's hustlesauce.info/episode 3 for the show notes. You'll have a link to the YouTube episode in those show notes as well. And I think we're good for today, Michael, right?
We are absolutely good. We just put a podcast out in the world today. That's what we did.
All right, great. We'll see you next time.